Welcome to Worldview Wednesday, the day where we talk about some of our favorite children's books. I am Hillary Ferrer of Mama Bear Apologetics, and with me is
Elizabeth Urbanowitz from Foundation Worldview.
And I'm Lindsay from Mama Bear Apologetics.
So if you've been following our Quality Quarantine series, this week we are kind of focusing on Narnia. And so both Lindsay and I are the nerds that have the whole box set. And I've got, she's got the newer ones. I've got the ones that were like probably copyrighted a lot earlier. Your graphics are better than mine, but yeah, that's okay. Mine had the smell of old books. So
mine have images.
Oh, mine do too, I think.
Oh, okay, good. See, there you go.
Look, I got pictures.
See, great.
I love it. So one of the things that we noticed as we were talking about this is each of us had a different book that was really our favorite, and for different reasons. So we're just going to talk about each of those, just in case you've only been introduced to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because a lot of people, that's the only one that they know, and they haven't actually read the other ones. So I'm going to briefly talk about the one that used to be my favorite, and then I'm going to talk about the one that's actually my favorite now. Silver Chair was my favorite because I think this is such a good allegory for what sanctification and what actively listening, using the word, because like what happens in there is they have this list of things that Aslan has told them that they have to keep repeating over and over again, and they're having to find how it's relevant. And so it's this idea of embedding the word in our hearts. So if you want to get a good picture of like what sanctification is and walking the Christian life, following God's word, I think that one's a really great one. But I have to say this one, which is the final one, The Last Battle, is now my absolute favorite. The reason, number one, is I think that it's very prophetic in the sense that the kind of stuff that it's talking about in here is what I really see going on in the world right now, because it starts out with this ape and this donkey who, the ape is like this narcissist and the donkey's not very smart. And so the donkey's constantly being manipulated. But what we see happen in the book is that they find this old dead lion skin. And so the ape makes the donkey dress up in it and tells everybody that this is Aslan. This is the idea that we have false gospels that are going out that are masked as the true gospel, and they are not how it is described in scripture. It is oppressive, and you have this person who's claiming to be the mouthpiece of Aslan, who's really just doing his own agenda. And you have some of the Narnians that are just terrified because they love Aslan and they want to follow Aslan, and so they're doing all these things and they're saying, this is what Aslan's, these aren't like the stories of Aslan, this doesn't seem like him, but oh, we don't want to make him angry. They're so afraid of making Aslan angry because the ape has made Aslan into only this angry character. You don't want to make Aslan angry, which, as we're going to talk about tomorrow, we're going to talk about on Theology Thursday, just the concept of God's wrath and it not being the same, but they're obeying out of fear. And then this is what I think is most poignant. You have other ones that they later show that they discovered that this was not the real Aslan. And the dwarves decide, we were fooled once, we're never going to be fooled again. So even when the real Aslan comes, they won't recognize him because they said, you fooled me once, I'm not going to be fooled again. The dwarves are for the dwarves. And we see this happen a lot of times with people who are presented with a false gospel that is just an oppressive and not a biblical view of God. And that when the true God does come along, they don't know how to recognize him because it's like they've been inoculated. So I like it because of that. But I think my favorite thing I like about it is this is the last battle, and this is the proverbial heaven that they go to at the very end. And I basically cry every time I read it because I realize, oh my gosh, this is the land, this is the home that my soul longs for. And if we don't have a robust view of eternity, we're not going to understand anything we're doing here as a Christian, because if we think that this life is where it's at, then we've completely missed the point that we are living for eternity, and we're living for another world, the one that we were actually created to live in, that isn't this world. This world feels so uncomfortable because this is not the world we were created for. So I think this gives a really good picture to get that concept across to young and old. So that's why that one's my favorite.
Great one. Do you want to go next, Lindsay?
Yeah, I can go next. I had to unmute myself. Yes. No explanation needed for the moms out there why I had to mute myself. So we actually love The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in our house. So I'm going to share a photo of what I hit the wrong button again, guys. Okay, share a photo. All right. So this is the entryway to our house.
Oh my goodness.
And
Love it.
yes, so I invested in some stickers for my wall. And so we have it labeled Spare and with, of course, the candle. But what my plans are eventually is to paint a wardrobe on the inside of the spare but if I say, hey, you need to go to the spare the girls know exactly what we're talking about. They know why we call it the spare it's just a beloved book and movie in our family. But I also love a good prequel. And The Magician's Nephew is, I think, a great prequel. So at the end of the first movie, the uncle comes in, the professor comes in, and all of the kids have stumbled out of the wardrobe and they're all on the floor. And the professor comes in and he's got, I think, the ball, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, what are you all doing on the floor? And Peter goes, if we told you, you wouldn't believe us. And he just tosses Peter the ball and he's like, he knows.
Try me. That's what he says. He looks at the camera and says, try me.
Exactly. He is, he was there and he knows Narnia. And so The Magician's Nephew is, it's a story about the professor's experience in Narnia. And he goes, I love the different illustrations.
Yeah.
So it, following the storyline to see maybe how the animals started speaking, that is answered in The Magician's Nephew. So if your kids are like, how do those animals talk and those ones don't? Well, let me explain it to you. That's what The Magician's Nephew does. And honestly, I think if you're watching the movies with your kids, you could read them out of order. You don't necessarily need to follow 1 and 2. You could do 2 and 1. And I think that would flow quite nicely. That's what we did with our girls.
Well, that's how Lewis wrote them. So there's 2 ways to read it. You can read them in chronological order or the way that Lewis wrote them. And this would be I compared it to, I'm going through the whole Star Wars series for the first time. And so, cause that's on Disney Plus. And I know, best free subscription ever. And so John was like, okay, well, we're going to go from the actual beginning. We did the prequels first. So we actually did them out of order from how they filmed them, but it went in order in terms of the storyline. So it's like you have 2 ways that you can read these.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no wrong way to do it, really.
They're all great.
The stories are fantastic. Yeah, they're fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yep. My favorite is one that I guess, I don't know if it's a lot of people's favorite. It's kind of a little bit more random, but I love The Horse and His Boy. And I don't have it to hold up. So if one of you ladies could hold up The Horse and His Boy, thank you.
Oh, they both have the stones.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Look at that.
Yeah. So Aslan down at the bottom.
I was saying, I like Aslan down there.
Yeah. Yes, and that's actually
mine's got the cat. You're going to talk about the cat.
Yes. And so that's actually why I love this. So this book takes place while the Pevensey children are kings and queens of Narnia. So between the time when they're crowned and when they come tumbling out of the wardrobe.
Oh, I didn't know. So
it actually, so it actually takes place like in the middle of the end of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And so the main character is this boy named Shasta, and he is a slave boy. And he finds out that he's about to be sold to somebody that he doesn't want to be sold to. So he ends up escaping with this horse named Bree. And they're just going on this adventure. So a talking horse. And he has no idea, like he kind of knows like where he's going, but he doesn't really know the purpose of this except for that he's just trying to escape captivity. And throughout the adventure, like you see different animals. Like when he's outside of this one large city, there's like this giant cat that you saw in Hillary's book. And then there's a lion in another one. And there's this one scene that I just love because Shasta is riding Bree and this ferocious lion comes out of nowhere and starts chasing them. And it's like super intense. And as they're being chased, they come upon like another rider who is this girl named Aravis. And eventually like the 2 of them team up. And in the end, you find out that Shasta is actually this lost prince, that he, like he's the son of this king and he's just been living in captivity and he had no idea what his true identity was. But my favorite part is at the end, he finds out that this cat and this lion were both the same person, and that it was Aslan. And so it was Aslan chasing him. And he actually asks like why Aslan was chasing him. Like, why did you appear like this ferocious lion? And he said, you know, like I mean, he says it more eloquently. I can't remember exactly how C.S. Lewis wrote it, but basically, if Aslan hadn't been chasing him, he never would have met Aravis, and they never would have teamed up together, you know, so that was like necessary to the end. And I love that because it's such a picture of why God allows certain things in our lives, because God has promised us that he is working all things together for the good of those who love him. And there are so many things in our life that at the time we can't understand, where it just feels like this ferocious lion is chasing us. And it's like, God, I do not understand. Like, this would be so much nicer to just like ride along at a trot, not be chased by this ferocious lion. But then when looking back, we see how much good God brings out of these really difficult and painful situations. So I just love that in The Horse and His Boy, when Shasta, whose real name is Corin, I think I'm getting this right.
I think that's right.
Prince Corin, he like discovers like, oh my goodness, it was you were this lion chasing me. And if you hadn't chased me, if you hadn't scared me, like I never would have found out my true identity. I never would have, you know, like been reunited with my family. And so I just love the way that all comes together in The Horse and His Boy.
I think there's also a cat that comes and like when he's cold comes and like curls up
next to him.
It's like all these different ways that Aslan manifests himself. That sometimes he manifests as if he's chasing him, but I could be remembering this wrong. I feel like maybe there was someone behind him that they were coming after him, and unless he'd gotten faster, he would have gotten caught. I could be wrong about that. And so it's like all these things where he appears as, you know, something that's terrifying, but he also appears as something that's comforting.
Right.
And he has to recognize Aslan's hand in all of this. And that's, I love that. That's funny because I've never heard someone say that this one was their favorite. And those are, I don't know, I need to go reread that again because I remember that, but it wasn't as poignant as when you pointed it out.
Yeah, well, whenever I tell somebody that's my favorite one, they're always kind of like, oh, that's an interesting one. I'm like, I don't know why, but I just love it.
Yeah. So anyway, there's a couple other ones. There's the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. There's Prince Caspian and Voyage of the Dawn Treader. There we go. So here, let's see, Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Let's see what mine looks like. It's pretty similar. Narnian ships, it's kind of interesting how they really captured the idea of Narnian ships. And then Prince Caspian, this one's on Disney.
I love this one.
Okay, can I say my favorite thing?
I've got the silver chair, sorry.
Oh, okay, yeah. My favorite one about Prince Caspian, this is really dumb, is there's a bear in there that's constantly sucking on his paws. And they're always like, stop sucking on your paws. And they actually have it. You see it just once in the movie with him going, and sucking on his paw, and he realizes how silly he looks. So anyway, I like that aspect. Anyway, so this is just a great series to go through with your kids. And we're going to include in the notes that I did find somewhere where it says that there is an audio recording of someone reading all 7 books for free. And so I hope that works. We're going to include that link. But yeah, I think this is a great series. I mean, there are so many endless conversations that can be had with these books. To wrap it up, I'm just going to go into this concept that C.S. Lewis talks about called watchful dragons. Watchful dragons are this idea that sometimes people who might be averse to the gospel, it's kind of like the idea of trying to make someone eat something healthy. If you tell them it's healthy, all of a sudden it's like it just doesn't taste very good. But if you don't tell them it's healthy, they might be like, oh, this is amazing. That we have something in us that's almost averse to things that are good for us. And this is especially true when someone's trying to shove religion down our throat. That there's this watchful dragon that's trying to go like this to anything. If they're already, you know, kind of like this to God, that if there's something where you say this is an allegory about God, they're going to go like this. But if you can remove that watchful dragon and basically get that childlike wonder of I'm just listening to a good story right now, you're actually able to get aspects of the gospel in that you might normally never have been able to do because they're wrapped up in the story. And so I would recommend going to one of our old podcasts that's on this article called I Was an Atheist Until I Read Lord of the Rings, where this is exactly what happened to them is after reading Lord of the Rings, suddenly all these spiritual things started making sense. So especially if you have—
I'll put that in the notes.
Okay, yeah. Especially if you have someone who is maybe averse, a kid that really has been burned by religion. These are the kinds of things that some of the concepts of Christianity can start making sense because they're not being read in the context of scripture. It's being read in the context of story. And that is the beauty that art brings to the gospel. So that's our Worldview Wednesday for today. Tomorrow, we are going to talk about some of the things from the movie that may not be theologically correct, but why we can still roll with it because they still have benefit. So we're going to be comparing some of the actual theology to C.S. Lewis's theology. So we will see you tomorrow for Theology Thursday.
Bye.
Bye.